Welcome back, everybody. All right, so you can actually go ahead and you can change the color of these fonts. Now, we already know how to do that. We can say color, and then you can give in a specific color. So in this case, we'll give it blue. But there are two other kinds of colors that you can use, okay? So the first thing you can use is you can use a hex code. And what a hex code looks like is you put in the hashtag there, and then you give it a color like, 0 FF like this. All right, and you can see that the font changes, and then if you change this, to like something like that, it does change up, quite a bit. You can give it more. You can use the colors to your advantage. Now, one tip that I like to give people, especially beginner designers, is that you don't want to use the default whenever possible, with maybe the exception of orange, because orange, there isn't too many options. But instead of giving a red color, right, like this, that looks way too stock, and if you go ahead and you change it up a bit, it looks a lot better. So the other way you can do that is you can give it an RGB value, and that is a red, green, blue. So if you go RGB, and then you have to put in two brackets like this, and what you do is you can, let's say, give it a number between 0 and 255. So let's just do 33, 33, and 33, okay? And what ends up happening is if you go, let's say, 255, 33, 33, and you can go 255 here. But if you take this down to 250, you can see that it changes a bit, or you can change it down to 100. That changes a bit. And then if you give this up to, I don't know, let's say 100, you can see that it changes ever so slightly. And if we give this down to, let's say, 200, you can see that the color does change. So what do I like to do? I like to use the RGB values just because you can go ahead and play around with everything up there. The hex values do work, but they're a little bit obscure. So when it comes to color, again, you don't want to use the stock colors because they're kind of old and they're kind of boring. Now, of course, if you use 0, 0, and 0, that's black. And if you go 255 by 255 by 255, that's white. Now, whenever you're using black and white, again, another tip is to use an off-white or an off-black, meaning that if you change this down to, let's say, 240 a piece, right? 240, 240, and you might not be able to see this, but it is, in fact, not white. So you can kind of see it's a gray there, okay? And actually, let's just to highlight this, background color, and I'm going to go gray, okay? And both spellings of gray are work. So you can see that this here is an off-white. It's not exactly a white. And if I go back to 255, and by the way, if you add in another number there, the program will crash. So if you add in an off-white, it does look a little bit better. In fact, I do so a lot. And if you look at the course material, the heading, so for example, the Learn CSS in 1 hour, I use off-whites. I don't use actually any whites. The other thing you can do is you can also do an off-black. Now, again, it doesn't need to be far off black, but this is probably one of the best tips that I was ever taught. And if you go 10, I'll maybe give something a little more noticeable. But even if you do 10, 10, 10, that is a lot better than 0, 0, 0. So you can see that this is an off-black. That's a bit too much. So like even 20 is actually pretty good. So 20, 20, and 20. You can see that that is an off-black, and it's actually quite different. And if I get rid of the background color, you can see that there is a difference between these two. It's very subtle, but it is there. And those little subtleties when it comes to designing are actually really important, okay? Okay, so even if you wanted to do 50, 50, and 50, all right, you can see that that's even more gray. So that's a bit too much. But if you take a slightly off black or an off white, it does end up working out. All right, I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.